Greetings programs, welcome back to the grid. I am Sark and we'll continue with our still life today. We're going to start with this clay vase or jar, I'm not really sure what to call it, and we're going to crop it out so that we can just focus on that one piece at a time. It's going to be a little easier to work that way, so okay. Yeah, that should be pretty easy to work from. I guess it might make sense to bring this up right to where I think the bottom ought to be. It's going to be a little funny because we're looking down on it, and I'm going to be trying to generate a profile, but I think that we're going to be able to match these curves. It's a pretty simple shape. So we'll save a copy. We're going to put it next to our other image. So we're just going to call this jar. Alright, so that's done. And we're going to build a new plane in our scene. Set it to one length segment by one length segment. Open the material editor with the M key and use this unused slot here. I don't even really need, well, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to use the diffuse channel. It doesn't really matter which channel you use or if you just use a map covering the whole slot. Diffuse channel will be fine. You choose bitmap, desktop. There it is. Okay. So we'll assign that to our plane. Looks like we almost eyeballed the size, but we ought to make sure we have it right. So 217 by 229. Do well. Since we don't have that set up on a plane, I would do well to just scale this until it's right. So I guess we can do this. Yeah. Let's scale it to our gray boxed jar. That'll be the smart thing to do. We know that we have our height and width proportions right, so. Bigger than that. It's probably about right. So we're going to go with that. We can always tweak our object once it's done being modeled. So all this other stuff doesn't need to be in our way right now. We can just model based on this. So I wonder if I ever did get that centered. Probably not. It's probably more like that's the center. So we'll take this plane, pull it basically to the back of the table, and we're going to right click on it and choose object properties, and we're going to choose freeze and uncheck show frozen in gray. So that's kind of locked in there. We can't select it, it won't get in our way. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to our perspective viewport where I have the physical camera set up, and I'm going to press P to detach us from the camera, right? So there's our world. It might be a little disorienting with that fixed background there, so we're going to take our background out. I'm going to hit Alt B and turn that off, right? Oh, I guess the perspective, what's the default for it? The perspective has a default of this gradient, which I used to hate, but now I've gotten used to, so there it is. This camera we don't need, so we can hide it. All this stuff we don't need because our grid is set up already on the table, so we can hide that too. And now we have an empty workspace. We can take our let's see, take our safe frames back with Shift F. Don't need those right now. And this is a pretty clean, normal 3ds Max default work environment, right? So My grid's a little smaller than average because it has 6 grid spaces instead of 7, but everything else is pretty much default. So I think that this jar is a good candidate for lathing. We're going to use the line tool. And not get too fussy, just rough it out. And of course it gets an inside line. Doesn't really matter too much. We're not going to be looking too deep inside the jar, but for shadows or whatever, try and make it as accurate as you can. And now we're going to start adjusting this line. So if you just click the line, or if you click 1 for vertex, you can go into vertex mode. I think 1 does it. Let me check. So if I don't have it selected and I press the 1 key, yeah. And let's start smoothing out this jar. You can see that it goes pretty quick. It's pretty easy to get it more or less exactly right. Try and keep the inside line paired to your outside line so that it more or less matches. Might want to play with some curves here. See if we can get this one. Don't really need to. I mean, it's a little flatter right there, right? So let's look at it. If we were playing with some Bezier curves, could we? Oops. I think that's closer to it. So play with this one a little maybe. Something like that. This one comes in. This is a little exaggerated. And it does want to get a little thicker at the top. That makes sense. And there is kind of like a hard edge there, which I like. It's kind of attractive. So let's try and not mess that up too bad, huh? Let's see what it looks like a little bit. So we'll choose lathe. We'll choose min. We were drawing on the right hand side, half the jar. And I don't know, it's not too far off, probably 32 seconds. Looks like a clay jar. Nothing too fancy today. Not worried about textures yet. When we get to textures, it'll be fun to put some like sort of ridges on there. I think that if you look at it, yeah, you can see just the vague impression that somebody's, that somebody made that by hand. Of course, I've got this discrepancy between the perspective view and the flat way that this was been drawn. Let's see. I want to make sure that these are on 0. Should have done that before we applied the lathe, so I'm actually going to delete the lathe just to prevent any little weird overlaps in our weld. And, ooh. There we go. Okay. Don't have the part of the object selected when you put the lathe on. And then press weld core, and everything should be hunky-dory. Okay. So, yeah, that's it. Now we can, the fun part is we can go back to our scene, unhide all, drag this over to where we think it belongs. We could even just do an alignment, right? If I center the pivot on this, and this one has, should I move it to the base? That probably makes sense, right? Is there a button for that? I can certainly just set it to 0. There we go, and I already know the other one's pivot point is at its base. So we'll choose the Align tool. That's this one here. Click on our other object, and our new jar is pivot to pivot right in place. You can see that it's pretty much exactly in that spot. Not even sure it needs much adjustment. So if we go look from our camera's point of view and we hide our plane, well, we don't have to worry about that. We hit Alt B and we choose to use our environment background again, or wait, use our file, which should be the same thing. It is. Okay. How's that look? So we can put this same sort of onion skin thing on here. I think, oh, it's hard to tell with the second layer of my piece of pottery. Wow, it's pretty close. If anything, ours is just a tiny bit big. I'm going to right click on the scale tool, take it down to 98%, see what that looks like. Yeah, I think I like that better. So it's not quite as tall, maybe. So let's scale that a little bit. This is just non-uniform scale. Take it back to that height, 102, 105. Is this doing anything? No. Why? Oh, because I'm working in absolute. All right, so actually undo all that. All right. Right click on our scale tool, or sorry, left click and hold on our scale tool, and get the one that lets us do one axis at a time, and let's play with that. So let's offset. Let's do 98% here, 98% here, and like 105 here. Okay, that was having the result I expected. Now 105 is a bit much, so we'll go back and we'll choose 102. Good. In terms of left and right, it seems a little tricky to get. It's about right. Again, I keep looking at my inside line, and I'm seeing that. I guess maybe theirs is a little thinner at the top. So go back into our line and just pull this in a little bit. This is also very sharp, so I want to see if maybe I can get away with a Bezier corner and just soften that. And so you could still have like your sharp edge, but you kind of have a curve leading up to it. And something like that might be what I want. See how it looks now. Still feels a little off. Well, whatever, it's a painting, right? Maybe his was a little uneven, because it just seems that mine is too far to the right at the bottom, or too far to the left at the bottom, and then too far to the right at the top. And if I take a happy medium, I'm kind of off in both places. So we'll just split the difference there. We know that our cylinder is perfectly round. I'm sure it's very hard to paint a perfectly round cylinder, and this is kind of an impressionistic painting. So we're going to chalk that up to some inconsistencies, and there's our vase. Feels like it belongs there with the other gray boxed objects. So that looks good to me. Alright, we're going to take a look next at the peach and the grapes. The grapes are going to be super easy. All you have to do with the grapes is make a box that's a little bit long, and then just throw an open subdiv or a turbo smooth on it, and maybe set it to 2 iterations, and you're done. That's all there is. So, you know, it might be a heavier way to make a grape. I wouldn't use it as a game asset. In fact, if I was making grapes in a video game, I might just make them sprites or something. I don't know. Depends on the video card of the target user, right? Where's my polygon counter? Someday I'm going to figure out how I broke my polygon counter. Anyway, this will do. So, you know, probably the grape shouldn't be 192 surfaces per grape. Okay, probably 1 would be the goal in a video game, or maybe like 6. But for a photorealistic render, you know, it's not going to slow down our render time that much to have that many more surfaces in the grape, so should be fine. That's it for today. Good luck, have fun.